Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, New in 17.2, WinForms and WPF, presented by DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. In this session, they'll explore the newest desktop components and features set to ship as part of version 17.2. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second What's New in version 17.2 presentation for this week. As is now our custom with WinForms and WPF, I'm going to ask Julian to present the WPF portion today, and I'll show you around the changes to WinForms. So, good morning, Julian.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, or whatever time it is around your neck of the woods. And I don't know about this ask Julian to do the WPF stuff. I woke up one morning and there was this email saying I was doing WPF. So,
Well, the joys of having such a prestigious title like CTO, I guess.
Yeah. 3-letter acronym time.
Absolutely. We're going to see some of those today too.
Yeah.
So the agenda, we're going to talk about some frequently asked questions surrounding our releases. I'll step through a number of slides and demonstrations on WinForms, and then we'll switch over to your machine for some WPF goodies and finish up with some questions and answers. So please write your questions in the little panel on GoToWebinar. First question that we generally get asked when we do a release is, when will it be available? And the answer to that, Julian, is?
It's already available. It's been out for nearly 2 weeks, actually. Unfortunately, it was Thanksgiving week last week. Otherwise, we'd have had these webinars last week. But it's there. It's in the download center.
It is, so it's already post beta and you can download it now. Which brings us to our second most frequently asked question, believe it or not. Where do I get it? Jump over to the DevExpress website, and if you're not already logged in, you'll see a login section at the top right-hand side of the page. If you select that, simply type in your email address, no point trying to use mine, and your password. And of course, if you've forgotten your password, you can reset it using the I forgot my password link. Now, Julian, don't try using secret squirrel 123. I changed it.
Oh, I just found that out. Dang.
Once you've logged in, you'll actually see that this top menu changes. You can see your details, your customer number, and an option to download your products. Simply select that and you'll get to the download manager. Now, depending on what version subscription you have or what type of subscription you have as to what you'll see, universal, you'll see this universal subscription. You may have an ASP.NET subscription or just a WinForms subscription. Select the one that's relevant to you and you'll see the latest version shown in the drop-down box. So at this stage, it's 17.2.3. From here, I can download the relevant file extension that I want. So typically, I download the executable, allowing me just to run the installer straight up. You might prefer to download the zip. The product documentation is also available for offline installation, to which you can download it as well. Now, we keep that separate so we can minimize the bandwidth required to download the installers themselves. Of course, close Visual Studio and run the installer, and then you will have access to the latest version. Which brings us to the next question. Can I run it side by side? Now, I'm actually a big fan of running multiple versions, especially when dealing with lots of different projects, because you may not want to or have the time straight away to upgrade each and every one of your projects. So yes, you can run all of our major versions side by side with very little impact. Now, the only thing that I would bring to your attention is that Visual Studio sometimes, particularly in the toolbox area or when you're adding references, you've just got to be careful to make sure you add the correct version. If you're working on a 17.1 project and you add a 17.2 button, you're in for a bit of fun just to clean up those references. But certainly you can run it side by side. I've got a note here about breaking changes. If you jump over to the DevExpress website, you can actually have a look at the impact between different versions. So for example, if you're currently running 15.2 and want to go to 17.1, or 17.2, sorry, then you can select the option and it will actually show you what breaking changes apply to your technologies between those versions. Now, it's a best practice that if you're upgrading from an earlier version, such as 16 to 17, etc., that you step through the major versions along the way. So if I'm upgrading a version 15.2 application, I'm going to take it to 16.1, 16.2, 17.1, 17.2. May seem like a lot of steps, but it certainly reduces the number of issues you may encounter moving between a large number of versions with the different changes that we make. Now, the final question is, how do I upgrade my project and what actually happens? So I suppose that's maybe two questions. You can invoke the DevExpress Components Project Converter directly within Visual Studio, or if you've got this little checkbox happening here inside the advanced settings that will prompt you to upgrade when you open a project in Visual Studio. And in essence, you can select an individual project, or you can select a folder and a collection of projects to upgrade at the same time. You've got some other options here, such as whether you want it to process subdirectories, so you might have a hierarchy of projects and subprojects, process read-only files, they may be marked as read-only by your source control system, and whether you want us to create a backup of any files we change, which is always worthwhile doing. And then you can simply hit upgrade. But what does that actually do? Well, it goes through and updates in terms of WinForms your CS_proj or your VB_proj file, replacing the references to the DLLs with the correct version that you're moving to. It would also go through and update any resx files and again update the references to the correct binaries that would then be linked. In terms of, say, a web project, it's going to update your web config and any designer files. What it doesn't do, and I want to stress this, is it doesn't modify your code. It doesn't try and find any classes you may be using or methods you may be using and make any changes whatsoever. So it's purely about those references and the designer files, whether they're designer being web or .resx being WinForms, etc. So now let's start talking about WinForm changes. I've got a number of slides, so I'll be jumping between the slides and also the demo center, which you can invoke as well once you've installed 17.2. Some of these changes apply to both WinForms and WPF, so there's a number of demos that I'm actually going to defer to Julian that he can show you when it's time for his part of the presentation. We mentioned three-letter acronyms before, and we're going to start with one which is SVG. SVG has been around now since 2013, 2014 in mainstream and stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. And just as the words themselves indicate, the key elements here are the fact that it's scalable. By the use of vectors, so lines, shapes, etc., we're talking about images that will work well on any size resolution that you want. So you can scale up and down without any loss. So there's no pixelation happening. It doesn't look blurry. SVG has become more and more mainstream, and we're pleased to announce that we've added support for SVG in all of our ribbons and toolbars. We've added a new SVG image collection control, which allows you to select SVG elements inside your projects, just the same as you would have with a traditional image binder, and that can be stored either as a local resource or an embedded resource, etc. We've added an SVG icon builder, which I'm going to show you through in a second, and a brand new SVG skin called Bezier. I believe that's how you say it, isn't it, Julian? Bezier?
Bezier. It's named after Pierre Bezier, who was an engineer and designer at Renault in the 60s. It was initially developed by somebody called Paul de Castelgau at Citroën, but it was popularized by Bezier, so he gets his name on it.
There you go. Not an easy one to say or spell, unfortunately. And with the implementation of that skin, we've got some color swatches, which I'm going to show you as well. And during that part of the presentation, I'll be highlighting the magnifier dialog. So let's jump over to Visual Studio and show you how you can invoke the SVG icon builder. Now, once you've installed the tools, the DevExpress menu is shown inside Visual Studio. From here, you've got access to things like the project converter. You can see I'm running multiple versions, so I can choose between the two. But what I'm interested in here is under all platforms, I'm going to select Run SVG Icon Builder. Now, this is a cool little utility, meaning you don't have to go out to third-party products in order to build SVG images or icons. It also allows you to blend standard icons with other information. So these days we're used to seeing, say, a document icon with a little star indicating that it's new, or a sub-save icon. What we can do here, we've got the application interface. On the left-hand side, I've got my tool panel to which I can jump to categories, or I can search, I can scroll through all the different icons we provide. And then we've got these smaller indents, which are actions. If I jump into search and select or type print, I want a printer icon, I drag that into the canvas area here. Now, the buttons available is create new icon, I can save my SVG out, I can save as, I can export it to a PNG if I need to, or I could reset any changes. On the right hand side, I can actually come through and recolorize my icon should I want to. I'm going to reset and drag my printer back across because I want to work with it in gray. We've got the ability to rotate the icon, flip the icon, and then generally move sub-elements around the screen and remove. We can see the thumbnail in the bottom right-hand side. So here I've got this printer, and it may be that I want to indicate printer information. So in my actions panel, I'm simply going to grab the info icon and drag that into the position I want, and you can see quite nicely what that's going to look like. The other thing I can do is hit the preview option here, and I can see what that's going to look like both in an inverse function and also the standard coloring that I've got. I mentioned the magnifier before. I'm going to invoke that by clicking magnifier, and we've got the loop or the magnifier control, which allows me anywhere on screen, not just within the icon builder, but anywhere where I can click, and we can see that the light gray, I almost said green again, the light gray numbers represent the last color I selected, whereas the darker numbers above are showing the RGB color of the one I'm moving over. Now, this is a great little tool for implementing a color picker, and in version 17.2 we've actually released the magnifier tool as a standalone component, so you can actually implement that into your software as well. At this point I can jump back to the design or canvas area, and I could save my icon, etc. So I'm going to exit that. Now, the other thing that I mentioned was the theming, which is really, really cool when it comes to the SVG theme or the Bezier theme. Now, I'm just going to invoke the Outlook-inspired demo for now. Once this comes up, I'll be selecting a new theme. So I'm going to go to View, and I've got my Appearance window. And we can see we've got the standard window of appearances that we've shipped for a while, but we've now got this new one called the Bezier, or Bezier, or however you want to pronounce it. Now, once I select this theme, we're going to see a couple of things happen. First of all, obviously we get the default colors that are shipped with that, but we can also now see that we've got this color swatch. So I've implemented the new skin, and when I click color swatch, I now get the ability to theme or change the palettes around on that SVG theme. And this is one of the really cool things with moving to this type of formatting or technology. So I can come through and look at the different swatches that we ship. I think one of my favorite has to be on the 4th page, which was the blackberry shake. Not sure what a blackberry shake is, but when I select that, or in fact select any of these options, we're going to see that the screen indicates what the swatch is going to do. So if I hit apply, that's then going to update the theme that I've got on screen, and we can see that just from the highlighting and some of the other color changes that has now been applied. So I think that's really, really cool functionality as far as the introduction for SVG. A number of our controls are also implementing DPI awareness. Now, obviously, more and more modern things are happening. We've got monitors with 4K, 5K resolution, and at that point, people are increasing the DPI or dots per inch. So typically, it would affect things like fonts. You might be running your fonts at 125%, but everything else is rendered so it's nice and crisp and clean on your screen. So the DataGrid and cell editors now take or acknowledge what's going on in that DPI awareness factor, as does the PDF viewer, which I'll show you a couple of shots from later on. And we also have a DPI aware image collection, which when you implement that means that the images aren't going to get blurry if you've got that resize happening or those custom scalings happening with your environment settings. Moving on to the controls themselves, the DataGrid control has a brand new feature which in terms of rendering, in terms of performance, makes a huge difference, and that's DirectX hardware acceleration support. Now, basically, when the .NET Framework was released 2003, it used a painting mechanism or rendering mechanism called GDI+. And even if you're into gaming all the way back then, we had DirectX. It's now in version 10, I believe, ships standard with Windows, but it's something that allows your graphics to render utilizing the GPUs on your graphics card in a much smoother, faster way. Julian, did you want to give a quick overview of the DirectX stuff?
Well, as you said, essentially WinForms, when it first came out, used GDI+, and it hasn't changed since. GDI stands for Graphics Device Interface. It's essentially an API for Windows. It's some core technology inside Windows, and it's just responsible for representing some kind of graphical interface on the screen. Excuse me. So drawing lines and filling and all that kind of stuff. It's apparently relatively hard to use for advanced animation, something I've never actually tried to do. It lacks apparently a notion for synchronizing with individual video frames on the video card. Doesn't do hardware rasterization for 3D effects and all that kind of stuff. So modern games and apps who really want to, get fast rendering on the screen usually use either DirectX or OpenGL instead, and basically those two technologies, DirectX, OpenGL, allow you to exploit the features of the modern GPU, the graphics cards that modern laptops and desktops actually have. So what we decided was, hey, let's see if we can't bypass WinForms GDI Plus interface and implement our own DirectX interface. And for shall we say large controls which have a lot of information to put on the screen, to have large surface area on the screen, let's see how using DirectX instead of GDI Plus actually makes a difference or not. And we found with the grid, especially when scrolling the grid, lots of animation, things happening all the time, it was up to 3 times faster. It was quite amazing. And then, of course, there's a whole thing about, as you mentioned earlier on, about high DPI screens. They're coming to be more normal than our old, 1080p or whatever. Old. That's like 5 years ago. And so on and so forth. So DirectX, it worked for us in the grid, and we're going to be doing a lot more work to target other large surface area controls like the scheduler, pivot grid, tree list, and obviously charting.
Absolutely. So when you run the WinForm demo and you get to the data grid, you've now got the option of running in standard GDI Plus mode or DirectX mode. And of course, that's not Direct 10 mode, but DirectX mode. It's always been DirectX. So I'm going to launch my demo in DirectX mode. You're not necessarily going to see any stellar differences through GoToWebinar, but certainly run it on your local machines and you will see just how smooth and nice it is. So I can scroll, I can do all sorts of things, and the that particular part of the demo when you run it locally is really, really nice. Other changes for the data grid. We're looking at drag and drop. We've introduced a really simple to work with drag drop system, which is based on the behavior manager control. We've got charts binding, so I'll show you a quick demonstration of that in a second as well. Some changes to the grid-based lookup control and some new functionality around clipboard management. So if I jump back over to here, and I'm going to search for a couple of demos. So this is just to show you how easy it is to find some of these things. Let's start typing drag drop and invoke the drag drop demo. On screen, we've got two simple grids, information on left and right. What I can do is click one or more items, and I'm going to just start to drag that. Now what you'll see straight away is that you can visualize exactly what's being moved between grid A and grid B rather than just the old traditional, hey, we're moving something type. So as I drag that over the top, we can see it's moving from one grid and been implemented in the other. Now to give you an idea as to how complicated that is to implement, there we go. Simply attach to the behavior manager control. And that's it. There's no more code involved. The other thing that has been added into the grid is the clipboard management. And there's certain scenarios where this becomes really, really cool. If you've used, say, SQL Management, so SQL Studio Management Editor, SMSS, whatever it is, and you go to edit the data, sometimes it's nice to be able to copy and paste directly into grids. Well, we've made that even simpler. Select a row or multiple rows. So let's say we go with 3 rows. I'm going to Control C here, and over on this one, Control V. And because I hit my function key, I only copied 1 row, but you can see you can copy and paste between elements. So that means if you've got source data sitting in Excel or somewhere else that's formatted in the columns that you want, it makes it really easy to implement. The next thing that I want to present is the chart binding. So we're going to go for data grid charting, which is under the charting elements. We'll start this up. And what we've got is an example of how easy it is to bind charts or multiple charts in this example directly to a data grid. So here I want to say I want to incorporate bikes from Connecticut. So you can see as I toggle this on, we're going to see Connecticut gets added into here. Connecticut is the only option for bikes. It doesn't appear under accessories or clothing yet, but I can just as easily add that in to any categories I want. And likewise, I can do a blanket add on an entire thing. So binding charts to your data grid is now simpler than ever. I talked about the enhanced or the changes to the lookup edit. So let's go with lookup edit, the extended lookup editor. Now this feature, the actual using a grid as a drop down or as a lookup has been around for a while, and it's got some great functionality in there. I did a blog about it many years ago as one of the hidden gems. With this new version, you can actually add this. We're looking at the different styles. So you can render your records as tiles or modern lists. And in fact, we support a default tile mode. We support the Kanban view and a list view. And you can see from this example, utilizing a personnel record where you've got that nice image of the person, their details and name all rendered a lot nicer than just a traditional grid. Another example may be if you're selecting from a credit card list, you can show the iconography of the credit card type, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, etc., because a picture paints 1,000 words. So that's really nice to be able to implement in that side of it. There's also changes such as the Excel-inspired filtering elements. You can now add filter elements with HTML formatting, custom images. You've got the ability of using predefined filter items for date filters or values, as well as radio group-based filtering in the grid. Now, the next thing on my list was charts, so I'm going to let Julian present that when he gets to his WPF section. The tree list control. There's a lot happening with the tree list. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. The drag drop manager is implemented the same way as you saw with the grid. One of the other cool things is the hierarchy column. Now, traditionally, if you go with, I'll type hierarchy maybe, and then I actually have to spell it correctly, and we'll go with tree list. Oops. Feel free to talk at any point, Julian, while I find my tree list.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not quite sure where you're at the moment. I'm going to be talking about the tree view anyway, so if you want to leave it to me, I can certainly do that for WPF, and it's the same for WinForms.
Well, the hierarchy column basically allows you to do your collapse and expand in any column rather than just being traditionally the first column in the list, which makes it nice, and it doesn't matter where you move it around at that point. There's been changes to the pivot grid. We've got a number of performance enhancements, and as with every version that we release, performance continues to be something that the teams work on continuously. We're trying to get as much benefit out of so that your user experience is just top-notch. We've added the IntelliSense editor for unbound field expressions, and again, that support for SVG icons. Now, the diagram control, which I'm going to let you show, has introduced a new layout, which is the mind map layout. Now, I'm a big fan of mind maps. Those people that know me personally know how much I love planning with mind maps, etc. So the fact that this layout engine's been added to the diagram control, I think, is my #1 favorite feature for this release. We've added some new enhancements for the binding behavior. You've got two-way binding on the diagram control. There's a new scrolling mode, which means you don't see scroll bars regardless of the page size if the content fits on the screen, SVG enhancements, and a ton of new functionality around the APIs. Now, the PDF viewer. I mentioned earlier about the DPI awareness. I'm just going to switch to another slide to give you an idea as to what that looks like in terms of a PDF viewer. Here is the PDF viewer in version 17.1 with the DPI awareness set to, or sorry, the DPI custom scale on font set to 125%. The PDF viewer did not honor what was going on there. Whereas in version 17.2, you'll see that that is rendered much crisper, cleaner, and actually is aware of the environment setting. So it's a welcome change when it comes to what's going on there. There's some minor updates. I use the word minor, but the snap tool has now got full support for being able to add charts via the API. The spreadsheet control also has the ability of adding a new chart sheet, so separate to the page you're working on, which you can present as well, Julian. We've got updates to the color picker dialog. We've introduced simplified HTML inside the DataGrid, tree list, and container cells, and added item templates in the list box. As a CTP, we've got some new skinnable folder and file dialogs, which basically everybody, if you're in WinForms or WPF world and you're working with a file system, invoking that standard system dialog, you can now skin those. And again, Julian will be able to show you a little bit more on that. The vertical grid has got support added for data filtering. The filter UI itself, so there's a filter UI component has been refined. You can associate new controls such as a grid view or chart control within a simple couple of clicks at design time, minimizing your efforts to implement that. We've added unified criteria-based filtering across all our grid controls. So the data grid, the property grid, the pivot grid, vertical grid, and you can use the criteria-based language to define filters, as well as updates to the layout control, and there are changes to the MVVM components as well. For example, there's a navigation service allowing you to navigate between views, and navigation history is now stored automatically. And the view model create event now introduces a static version which you can then handle as necessary. So how about you show some of those cool features, Julian, but utilizing the WPF side of things?
Okay, well, make me presenter and we'll kick off the WPF side of things.
I can certainly do that once I find you on my list. Make presenter.
There we go.
Done.
Thank you very much. Let me just show my screen, which you should see now, version 17.2 WPF. Now, as in recent previous releases, we've pretty much concentrated on improving and enhancing the current controls with version 17.2 of the DevExpress WPF suite. However, this time around, we went the further mile with 2 new controls and a mini suite of new dialogs, and Paul mentioned those earlier on. So let's start with those. I'm going to use the demo application here. So first thing I want to show you is the new hamburger menu for WPF. Now, I'm sure you all know what a hamburger menu is by now. It's an icon with 3 horizontal lines. There we are, 3 horizontal lines. It looks like, well, a hamburger. And when you touch or click it, it slides in and out as a sort of tree-like menu, pushing the main content to one side, as you can see here. To iterate the more important features for this hamburger menu, well, it's a menu. There's support for a standard menu item, as well as check and radio buttons and hyperlinks. The alignment of menu items can be either to the top, as it is here, or from the bottom, which is another option. You can have sub-menus. So let's have a quick sub-menu here. We have another sub-menu. And these display items in side panels, as we have here. And you can favorite some menu items directly in the collapsed menu, as we have here. There's a compact bottom bar here. At the moment, we only have one icon in. It's the configuration thing, so I can show that. There we are. And I can hide it again. And following along from our work elsewhere, especially on the web, it's adaptive. So as I shrink the window, it disappears automatically, or it can show, and if I do this, it appears over the main panel rather than pushing the panel to one side. So it's adaptive in that sense. So to make the window bigger, it'll push the main panel to one side. Make the panel smaller, it overlaps. So that's the new hamburger menu for WPF. Next one I want to look at is something that's really familiar. It's a radical rethinking of an existing control, the scheduler. Is it faster? Check. Better aligned with MVVM and core WPF principles? Check. Outlook inspired? Well, look at this. You know, we have this kind of pop-up helpful, I can't remember what this is actually called officially. It's like a pop-up thing. Fully implemented, yep. And what I mean by fully implemented in this particular sense is it's got a full complement of views. We have the day view, the work week view, the week view, month and timeline view. It has built-in windows and dialogs for setting appointments. So let's double click on that, and here we have an appointment dialog ready for you to enter whatever information you need, reminders and so on and so forth. Supports for resources as well as appointments, and it obviously has provision for using WPF themes and skins. Now, the old scheduler is still there, but I would recommend using the new one in new projects and investigating what it would take to move some of your old projects to using the new scheduler. After all, the new scheduler is where we shall be spending all our resources from now on, and at some point, don't know yet, the old scheduler will probably be deprecated. Of course, we have documented all the changes you will need to make that move to the new scheduler. The next new thing on the list is the new file dialogs. We're providing replacements for the open file dialog. So let's just click this, which will do a file open. So we're replacing that. Ditto the file save dialog. Here we are, the save dialog. And the folder browser dialog as well. The reason for doing this is, of course, if I change the theme, let's go for Visual Studio 2017 Dark, the dialog, the file dialog, is no longer the standard dialog, and so it obeys the WPF theme. So your file open, file save, and folder browser dialogs will look like your main app, whatever theme you're actually using in the main app. Currently, this is in CTP mode, Community Technology Preview mode. In other words, it's not quite finished. We're still doing a lot more testing with, you know what file systems are like, and we're doing some fine tuning. And once we've done all that and run it on a few more machines, the dialogs will be properly released. Now, I've covered the new controls and dialogs. It's time to investigate the new features we've added to existing controls. Because we're limited by time here, I won't be covering everything we've added. There's quite a lot. Instead, I'll touch on the features that can be demonstrated in a GoToWebinar and, features that I also found the most interesting. As Paul mentioned, the diagram control now has a new layout, a mind map layout. It's a non-linear hierarchical diagram automatically generated about some central topic or idea. So if I say I can add a child here, look, there's a new child. Well, let's increase the, there we are. So we have a new child. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. I need to hit the hand and move the hand. There we go. And now I can alter Julian's idea, even though he can't do proper grammar. Julian's idea. And there we go. So mind map control. We've also revamped the SVG rendering engine, as Paul mentioned, for WinForms. It's the same here for WPF. We've added extended support for new SVG elements, and we've extended the API so that events are now fired in the diagram controller in response to various user actions such as moving, copying or modifying items, and changing connectors, and so on and so forth. So the mind map and the diagram have been enhanced. DataGrid, that's the big one that everybody likes. First up for the DataGrid is it now has a compact grid mode. It can now dynamically adapt its content based upon the control dimensions. So it's a kind of adaptivity type thing. In compact mode, the grid displays a compact panel inspired by Microsoft Office that allows you to sort and group and filter records as normal. But let me close this options thing. And as I grow the panel size, well, let's grow the panel size. Notice the grid will suddenly decide it has enough room to display the information in a slightly different form. And so here we have some groupings on received, and if I shrink it, we get to the compact grid mode where we're no longer taking up a lot of room for if you like, the groupings, if you like, and we're displaying the individual rows in a more detail and bigger size. So the compact grid is something that is inspired by Outlook, obviously. We see that a lot in Outlook. Next up is, let's go back, the new column chooser enhancements. So let me find the chooser. And here we can hide and display columns. Here's the column chooser down in the bottom corner here. We can hide and display columns through the chooser. We can also reorder columns through the chooser. So let's move the contact name after the ID, and you'll notice the grid actually does the same. So you can remove, hide chart elements. We can also search for columns if you have your data source has a lot of columns. We can easily find a particular column and then add it or remove it. So there we are, add for address. And a new options tab allows you to configure major chart. Oh, that's the wrong thing. That's it. So let's do the chart control since I jumped ahead, which was kind of silly. The chart designer for WPF has been tweaked to work in a similar way to the WinForms chart designer, if you're familiar with that. It's got a same structure as the WinForms version. You can add, remove, hide chart elements via the structure tree. Options tab for configuring major chart element properties and so on and so forth. But what I'd like to show you is a few new features for the chart control itself rather than the designer. The first one is chart control now allows you to automatically calculate total labels for stacked bars and pies. Here we are, the bar total labels are labels that display series group total values, and they're outside the group. So here we are, we're automatically calculating these totals for each of these, in this case, stacked bars. I can turn them off, which is what we had before, and now we've turned them on. The total labels are available for the following bar series. We have stacked bars, side-by-side stacked bars, full stacked bars, side-by-side full stacked bars. And for the pie, let's have a quick look at what it looks like for the pie chart. Not that I'm a great fan of a pie chart, as Paul will tell you. So for pies or donuts, the total label is basically displayed in the center of the pie or the donut. So I can switch it to the title, or I can switch it as the label.
That's such an important chart.
No, it's hard to... Well, you're not going to get me started about this. It's hard to estimate areas and angles with pie charts. Never mind. Anyway. That's a story for another day. Next, the range control has been better integrated into the chart control. You can now display or hide individual series within the range control. This doesn't actually show that particular thing, but here's the range control where you're selecting a particular range. We can configure series representation, line, bar, area within the range control, and so on and so forth. Scale breaks, that's a new fab thing. You know the idea. You have a bar chart, and some of the bars are way, way taller than other bars in the same chart. So let me show you what this chart looks like without scale breaks. And we're showing the mass of the planets in the solar system. Jupiter, of course, biggest planet, heaviest planet, massiest planet. And Mercury is the smallest planet, and we can't even see the bar here, ditto Mars. So by adding scale breaks, as we have here, we can actually show the size of the lesser bars along with some indication that, whoa, this bar is really, really tall, and these bars are also really tall. We have different styles here. I'm showing the ragged break here. We can show a straight break, which is possibly more business-like, maybe. The waved break, don't know. But scale breaks now supported within bar charts within the charting. Oh, and also, you know, other types of charts as well. We're obviously just changing the way the scale works. Indicators, financial indicators, we have a nice cool animation now. Let's just show that one. So load that up and look at that nice little animation. Probably in GoToMeeting it's probably too fast, but we have that nice indicators, financial indicators animation. Chart legends, we know what they are, but now we can simultaneously display a marker and a checkbox. So it's easier for, let me show a marker and a checkbox. So the marker shows what color it is, and it's a line. Obviously here we have an area markers, and we have the ability to turn off the individual series through a checkbox. So the user can basically analyze data by turning individual series on and off. Next is we're going to jump to the multi-column tree view control. There's been a couple of changes here. First up is the ability for the user to indent and outdent selected nodes. So basically select some rows here and we can indent them, and we're basically altering the tree hierarchy at this point, or we can outdent them and so on and so forth. Outdent that. Woo. Create sales report gets all those. So indent, outdent individual nodes, and second, as you can see here, we've added the capability for the tree or hierarchy column, this particular column here, to appear in any position in the grid, not just on the standard left-hand side. And as you see here in this example, makes the ability to add flags and other indicators simple and visually prominent. If I change it back to where it normally is, it doesn't quote unquote look as nifty. So the hierarchy column can appear anywhere within the grid. You can just move it around. So instead of being the first column. Next up is the accordion control. So let's jump over there. Whoops, I can't spell. So it has a new collapse mode. So here's the accordion control, and we now have a collapse mode. In essence, it provides a customizable and more compact view. So what we're doing here is we're customizing it with 1, 2, 3, 4 country names instead of the full or regions, instead of these the complete list. So as you see, a nice feature if you're using the accordion control in this particular kind of situation. Chart sheet was something else that Paul mentioned. This is for the spreadsheet. So the chart sheet. This is the ability to place a chart on a separate worksheet by creating a chart sheet. So you can view, edit, or print the chart within its own page. So if you look here, we have a worksheet here with the chart on it and another worksheet where the data reside. So it's a more standard looking worksheet. I can alter some of these values. Let's say this is 3,000 and this is 500, say, and we go back over to the chart and it's reflecting those new values quite easily. So chart sheet, a way of just being able to view, edit, or print a chart on its own worksheet within its own page. Now, of course, the presentation about the visual changes of DevExpress WPF, as I've been doing, I should take the time to mention that we've added 4 new themes. We have the Office 2016 Black. We have the Visual Studio 2017 Dark and Blue and Light. So I've just clicked on blue. Let's wait for it to reset that spreadsheet. There we go. That's the Visual Studio 2017 Blue. And as I talked about before, the dialog, the new file dialogs and browser folder dialogs will follow the WPF theme. We've also released the WPF theme designer from CTP, and it's in a full release. The theme designer basically allows you to create personalized themes for DevExpress WPF controls. This release includes new instruments and improvements and simplify theme editing, filter colors, highlight colors, color picker, and color wheel. Now, finally, because we're getting close, I'd like to reiterate there are many, many more tweaks and enhancements to the WPF controls than I've been able to show here. For example, there have been many performance enhancements to DataGrid and PivotGrid for loading, filtering, and scrolling. APIs across the board have been enhanced. I spoke about the diagram control earlier, but there have been changes to the accordion, the docking control, rich text editor, and so on. Now, my advice here is to check out the what's new for the controls you use on a daily basis to see where the enhancements have been made and what they'll mean to you. And with that, it's back to Paul, and let me quickly show the relevant slide. It's question time.
The obligatory slide.
Indeed. Ooh, that's pretty good.
So we have had a number of questions come through, and one of the ones that I'll bring up first is,
and I believe the team have been answering them in the background.
They have. I'm just trying to scroll through them so I can get to. So is the hamburger menu also available in WinForms, Julian?
I have no idea. I don't think so.
It's okay. I've got the answer. The answer is not yet, but we are certainly working on it. We've had some feedback asking if we could separate WinForm presentation from WPF so that they both get more screen time, and that WPF could maybe include UWP. So thank you for the feedback. We will pass that on to, well, Julian, management for...
Actually, it's a good point. We have some very, very broad suites, and I was talking about this with Mehul and Don yesterday after the webinar. Our whole web set of suites, there are so many and so many different ways of using them that we're possibly going to have to in 18.1 to split them up and have separate webinars for ASP.NET and for DevExtreme and for Bootstrap and whatever, as well as, good idea, WinForms and WPF as separate webinars. Something for us to consider, as you say. But it's nice to have suites which are so broad and so well detailed that they do take up quite a bit of time when you're presenting what's new.
Absolutely. And of course, try to do some technical dives into some of these things is also a little difficult when there is so much to try and get through.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the new themes that have been new or updated in WPF, are they going to be available for WinForms? The obvious answer is, if they're not, then we expect to. There is a lot of work goes into the themes, and the different technologies require different uses. However, we're hoping with the new SVG skin, Le Bezier,
we'll turn you into a Frenchman yet, Bezier.
We are looking to add more skins that support that in the future. The common dialogs functionality, are we just reskinning the standard library, or are we sort of making it available for all standard dialogues in ComDialog DLL? So at this stage we're doing file dialogs, so the open, the browse, the save at this stage. There is a note here, for example, that our PDF viewer uses its own print dialog and things like that. So it's one of those things. It's not just a matter of trying to subclass and make pretty the standard dialogues. There's a lot of work goes into something so seemingly simple to operate. The drag and drop functionality, the question came in, can I drag a file from a network path into the grid? The functionality that we demonstrated before was utilizing the new behavior manager control that simplifies dragging data between different grids, or even using a single grid to reorder the data. You can certainly still use the standard drag drop events to handle other external drops. So a file being dragged over, you just handle the event as you would previously. There's some feedback on the things like the SVG skin. Thank you, Darren. Any problems at all that you have with any of the new stuff? The support center, just head over to devexpress.com/support, and the team there will work through any questions or so forth that you may have. We have, what other questions do we have? Extending the presentation times for the What's New webinars. Absolutely. It's again that fine balance. We appreciate the fact that you've had to take time out of your day to go through some of these things, whether it's in the live presentation or watching it on YouTube. And so it's important we do hear feedback like this. If we extend it or if we separate it, we want to make sure that it's going to be something that people want to go through. Likewise, with ideas for other webinars, if there's functionality or features you'd love to see us do a technical deep dive on, get in touch. Email Julian. His email address is right there on screen, and just say, Julian, we want this, and he will make it happen.
Yes.
So in closing, obviously we are so committed to this platform, WinForms and WPF, that it's not going anywhere. We love working with it. I personally love working with it, and it just goes from strength to strength.
I think the DirectX support actually points that out directly, that we are willing to spend the time to actually circumvent what is basically part of WinForms and try and get better speed, better capabilities by using another technology, and thereby making WinForms last longer and be more viable. And I can't say it clearer than that. We're great fans of WinForms. We have been, we still will be in the future. There's a lot of work to do in that sense, and we're going to do it.
Now, don't forget, everybody, there is also more webinars this week. We've got the HTML webinar, or the client-side control webinar happening tomorrow. We've got our dashboard analytics and reporting webinar on Friday. There's meetups happening around the world. So the Sydney meetup is this Friday. If you haven't already organized a ticket, then jump onto our website for details, or in a country near you. And it's great. I love launch week.
So do I. Even though it's launch month almost, yes. Anyway, Amanda.
Launch month. All right, guys, thank you very much. So like I mentioned before, today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available later today on our DevExpress YouTube channel. You will also get an email from us with that link once it is posted. And like Paul mentioned, we do have 2 more 17.2 launch webinars coming up this week. Visit devexpress.com/webinars to sign up today. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian and the team. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.